I just want to welcome everybody to LPC's Coffee and Collaboration. My name is Jennifer Scheich. I am the editor of Farm Journal's Pork and have the pleasure of getting to serve on the LPC Board of Directors as well. I also work with Angie Denton, and every month, or almost every month, we try to put together an LPC Coffee and Collaboration to give everybody an opportunity to stay in touch throughout the entire year and to keep learning from each other. We feel like there's so many great topics that we can cover in the lines of what we do, and there's so many different facets of what we do that our goal is to really create a variety of informational sessions that will help you grow or learn more about the other people on your team. For example, not a designer, but I always value opportunities to learn from designers and to get new ideas and to be able to share and bring that back to our team. So I encourage you to keep on the lookout for some of our future topic ideas. It looks like we're drawing in a great crowd for this topic, as I hoped we would, where we're going to talk about writing. But I encourage you to join us every month, and that information is always available through our LPC social media, and also as an LPC member, you receive that information as well. I'd be remiss to say, if you're joining us and you have any interest in learning more about LPC or finding out how you can get involved as a member, now is the perfect time to join and become a member of LPC. And there's so many great benefits that you'll be able to get by being a part of this organization. And feel free to drop me a note in the chat privately, or send me an email. I'll put my email in there as well, and I'd love to help connect you to how to become a member if you're not already. Couple quick bits of announcements. I don't think, well, there's so many people popping on. I'm not sure if Stacy's on. She did not think she would be able to. So I'm going to assume she's not. Apologize if you are Stacy, but Stacy Fox wanted to let everybody know, she serves as our executive director, that contest entries for our critique contest are open until May 3rd. AMS registration is also open for Ag Media Summit. And so I encourage you to go ahead and book the hotel rooms and get signed up for that, because I do think it's going to be a really great event. And I know that those rooms are going to fill up fast, because we've got it right back here in the Kansas City area. And so it always seems to draw a lot of people who can drive a little easier. And then also, if you have any interest in serving as a committee member or getting involved, possibly by serving as a board of director, there's an interest form available on our website. And so we just want you guys to know that the door is always open to get more people involved. And that's what we think makes our organization so great, is that there are a lot of people who invest and put time into it and want to make it better. So encourage you guys to get involved any way that you can. But thank you for getting involved by being here today. I'm super excited, because I think I could sit and talk all day with people about what's the best story you've ever told, what's the hardest story you've ever told. You know, I love finding out the process that writers take to approach a story, and what they learn from it personally as well. And so today I'm excited to welcome 3 amazing writers that I admire and enjoy reading their work, to share with us a little bit about one of the greatest stories that they've ever told. Before I introduce them, I don't want to forget to let you know that if this is your first time joining us, down at the bottom where the chat is, feel free to throw questions in there at any point. We've already started a chat over there, so if you haven't went and let us know who you are and where you're from, it's just our little way of trying to create some networking on the side. So in case there's somebody you've never met before, it may give you a chance to meet them through this coffee and collaboration. But also, please ask questions. We'd love to hear them. So today, I'd like to introduce you to Kylene Scott with the High Plains Journal, Wyatt Bechtel with Broadhead, and Megan Silveira with Angus Media, to talk about the greatest stories that they've ever told. And so as we get ready to kick this off, I'd like to start with Kylene. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll just kind of go Kylene, Wyatt, Megan, if that's okay with you guys. So Kylene, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you're from.
Well, I'm Kylene Scott. I work for the High Plains Journal. I've been here about 20 years. And I started actually as the copy editor. Then I moved to web editor. And eventually, since we got bought, they changed my title to a field editor. So there's a lot of editors in there. But primarily, I write stories, take pictures, cover meetings, do things like that. And I graduated from Oklahoma State 100 years ago with an ag communications degree. And I'm originally from Dodge City, and I'm still around Dodge. I live north of town. I work at home when I can, and then I work in the office when the boys are in school. So.
Wyatt Bechtel, worked for Broadhead, marketing agency out of Minneapolis. Worked remotely from my home here in Kansas City, Kansas. Prior to Broadhead was with Filament. Those companies merged here at the start of the year, but been in this position for 4.5 years. Prior to that, worked for Vance Publishing and then Farm Journal. Covered the beef and dairy industries. Actually started out on Pork Network when I was at Vance, so sat in similar shoes as Jennifer, covering the pork industry for a bit. But I'll be highlighting a couple articles I wrote while I was at Drovers. Originally from Kansas, grew up on a ranch 2.5 hours southwest of Kansas City, Eureka, Kansas, and I'm still very active in the family operation on weekends.
Good morning. My name is Megan Silveira. I am originally from California. I went to school at Oklahoma State University too, where I got my undergraduate degrees and my master's degree. And I was an intern here at Angus with the Journal in undergrad. And then when I was about a semester into my master's program, I had the opportunity to join Team Angus. I hit 4 years with the Journal last month. And I'm just really excited to be able to sit up here with some great writers and talk with everybody.
Well, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. And I'm so glad to have you guys be a part of this. So today I'd like to just kick things off by having each of you go through and tell us about your, why we're here today. What's the greatest story that you've ever told? But maybe also give us a little insight into how you first maybe learned about the idea, the process that you went through to write it. Kind of give us some of the nuts and bolts, and we'll go ahead and start with Kylene, and I'll share your story right now.
Well, my the greatest story I ever wrote was probably one of the worst times in my life. And it was actually, my dad had died March 1st of 2017. And the day of his funeral, we come home and got a phone call that there was a fire. We have land in Clark County, Kansas, which is south of Dodge City. Our farm was about 45-minute drive from where we live at, and had the phone call that there was a fire. And of course we had cows and calves down there calving, and my husband just left and just went down there and tried to save what he could. And he told me just stay at home because I had the boys there. The boys were, Sean was probably 6 and Chance was 3, not even 3 yet. And so I just stayed at home, and he kept calling me, updating me what was going on. And the fire got really close at one point, and then the wind switched and it just rolled through there, and it destroyed the barn, which is the barn in the house that was there. Nobody lived there. Thank goodness. His grandma had passed away, or she was in the nursing home. She hadn't passed away yet, but destroyed the house, the 100-year-old house, and the barn, and burned a lot of the cattle we had down there. And also at the same time, there was some family stuff going on. So it was a really, really difficult time. And I think it was, they had started wanting to get people down there and talk and on staff. And I think Bill Spiegel was the editor at the time. And I think Holly was the publisher, Holly Martin. And I had an idea to write a blog, and I'm just like, because I was off because of my dad's funeral and everything. And I had the idea to write the blog, and it was just so much emotion and everything at the time that I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. So I called my mom. I'm like, they want me to write about this and our experience. And this was a couple of days after. And so I ended up writing it, and we got to talk with Senator Roberts and Senator Moran. he came and they visited and talked to the farmers ranchers down there, and we were kind of on the north end of the fire, so ours wasn't near as, I mean, it's devastating, but it wasn't near the loss like some of the other neighbors to the south had experienced. So before, in 2016, there was Anderson Creek Fire, which was east in Barber County and Comanche County and over further that way. And so Jenny Latsky, she had covered a lot of that. And so all of us just kind of jumped in and covered whatever we could find. And Bill Spiegel, he jumped in and he spent some time down there in Ashland with, the fire stuff. So it was a pretty trying time for my family. And, I had to keep working just to keep my mind off of everything. So it was a difficult time to even just get regular stories done. I mean, I had cover stories that had to be done, and it was really trying time. What else? And since then, since we've had the recovery from the fire, I always know in the back of my head what these people are going through, how they're feeling, and the resources. And so I'm good about helping put out the hard news stuff, like where they need to go, who they need to call, what meetings they need to attend, and just from my personal experience. So like with this smokehouse fire that happened in February, I just easily pulled all that stuff. I knew where to go and who to send it to, and it's just something that has become normal, I guess, because the fires are always going to happen out here, and it seems like it's getting drier and hotter. And I've always been a weather nut, so I watch the weather and like the storms that come through, and so that's just one of my things that I keep up on is the weather. And that blog, actually, The Worst Day of My Life, Senator Roberts from Kansas, he read it on the Senate floor. And actually on my Facebook memories, it showed up today. There was a congressional record that had showed up that year in the mail. So I had a picture of it on my Facebook. So it's a constant reminder. And I think even Erica Earlbeck with Texas Tech, she interviewed me a few times about the fire and the response and being part of the media. And I included one of my interviews in her book that she wrote, that I think it came out maybe last year. I'm not sure, but Erica's got a book that there's some information about covering crises and that sort of thing. And since then, the stories that really make me happy are those ones that, not so much the tragedy and the all that sort of thing. It's the ones that really enthuse me are the folks that are really energizing, that are happy about what they're talking about. Like I got to interview Billy Allen, which he's a horse person that was from Kansas, and he had a horse feed company, and he was retiring. He'd sold the company, and I interviewed him as he was retiring and moving, and it was just such a great interview, even if it was over the phone. And same with a gal that's in Western Kansas here, Letty McKinney. She's got a kind of I don't know if you call it a tourist business. She's in Johnson, Kansas, which is the furthest you can get west against the Colorado border. And she's got the round top, she calls it. And it's just a round top that she rents out for weddings and parties. And she came home to the farm and helped her dad. He had a brain tumor, and she's just so energizing and so happy to be back home, finding a way to make things work. And it's interesting following her on social media. And the same with Ag with Emma. I don't know if anybody's seen her on social media. I interviewed her right when she was kind of taken off. So those people like that really make me enthusiastic about writing about, their lives and that sort of thing.
So thank you for sharing. I think your point about the sensitivity that you have now as a writer, having been through that, is a really important one, because it forever marks the rest of your stories for sure, because you see things through a different lens and you have a perspective that, you know, nobody really wants to have, but it's really neat how you're sharing that with other people through the gift of your writing. So thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to Wyatt. Tell us about your story, Wyatt.
Yep, pull up my desktop here. So I have a pair of stories that I was able to put together in 2018, prior to the NCBA convention that was in Phoenix that year. I had already planned to head in early to Arizona. I had a good friend that was living in Tucson at the time. Wanted to go and visit him for a few days ahead of the trade show and convention, and figured while I was down in the area, I'd look into doing any stories about border issues. 2018, we were a year into the Trump presidency. Couple of hot topics at that time, and still hot topics, were trade. We were looking at renegotiating NAFTA, which eventually became USMCA. At that point, it was still in trade negotiations, and border security was another issue, and still is to this day. So wanted to see if I could get with some ranchers in that area to talk about those topics. So got a hold of the staff at NCBA a few weeks ahead of the convention to help coordinate, get in contact with some folks to set up a day visiting people there in the Nogales area, which is hour and a half south of Tucson, if I'm remembering right, and probably 3-4 hours south of Phoenix. So one of the primary story I did was on securing border ranches. It was a feature on 2 different Arizona ranches that are actually neighbors there at Nogales. Dan Bell was who I was able to drive around with and see his ranch. The ZZ Cattle Corporation. It's been around since 1938. And he's got a lot of this bollard style fencing. So he was explaining to me how it works and in securing their ranch and the issues that they have to deal with. One of the main takeaways that I had from this is access with roads is the main issue for the border security. When they're patrolling, they need to be able to actually drive along the border and see what's happening. And Dan was able to drive me around and show me what all was going on. There was a lot of road construction at that time. They had these truck mounted mobile sensors to help tell what was going on at the border. Sinaloa cartel is the main cartel that controls that region and is bringing a lot of drug traffic and human trafficking across the border. So was able to get that firsthand experience seeing it with Dan. And then following my trip to Nogales, I met with Jim and Sue Chilton, who are neighbors to Dan Bell. Their ranch is just right next door to the west. They don't have any border fencing. It's, I think, a 4 or 5 wire barbed wire fence across their property. So they see a lot more traffic. And they detailed some of the different issues that they deal with. They get a ton of pictures with trail cams on their ranch of people illegally crossing, and they would really like to have more security in their area, which is understandable. So here's a picture of Dan also fixing some barbed wire fence that is on the international border, had been cut for people to cross. So a lot of nuances to that, and still trying to be figured out to this day. by our politicians. And another story that I was able to do was a profile piece on Juan Manuel Fletcher. He's a dual citizen and is a cattle importer. Lives on the U.S. side in Nogales. Wanted to be able to put a face behind the cattle importing industry. I get to see it on our family ranch. Some of our customers import cattle primarily from the Texas border, but our neighbors around us also bring in summer cattle for custom grazing that are from Mexico. So I wanted to see that firsthand, how it works. Also ties into some of the meat labeling issues that we've been talking about with country of origin labeling. And then of course, trade. So it was good to talk with Juan about how he sees things, how his business works, and put a face behind it. And with both of these pieces, I was able to get 2-minute video interviews, so that way it could help support the article and let people hear for themselves what Dan and Juan had to say about those particular issues. And I will stop sharing now.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to quit editorializing to save time. Megan, I'm going to let you go on, but thank you for sharing. That was great, Wyatt.
So I'll share my screen as well. And this story that I am sharing was published in our September issue last year as a part of a special section we dedicate towards our National Junior Angus show. And when our team goes to the show, we typically go in with a list of stories that we know we want to cover, specific contests, or we write about the showmanship winner. But we also leave some pages blank for stories that we might just happen across while we're at the show. And for me, I took this center photo during the livestock judging portion of one of the mini contests that our junior show features. And most of the juniors were sitting up in the bleachers with space in between them, quietly filling out their form. But this young junior was sitting in a chair in the ring up close to the cattle with one of the junior board members alongside him. And it was just kind of one of those moments where I felt like there was a story that I needed to learn more about, and it felt like it was going to be a good one. So after the show, we came home and I talked to some of our events and education gals, and they said, this is Kelson. He has a little bit of a hearing impediment, but he is a super involved junior. He shows locally and at the junior show, and he's really involved with some contests, and they thought it would be a good story too. And when I called him, I knew that it was going to be a fun time. He held up his cat immediately into the Zoom chat, and he said, this is baloney. And I then showed him photos of my own cat, and we kind of bonded over that. But from there, it kind of became the story that just kept giving. Because Kelson has a unique story in the fact that he's not defined by his hearing issues. He's a junior that loves going to events. He loves competing in many of the programs that our team is so happy to provide. His parents had a really diverse Angus background and were passionate about the breed. And we're happy to see that Kelson was going on to be following in their footsteps and just involved in the beef industry. And they'd kind of recommended that I talk to our regional managers and some former junior board members for the piece. And this is kind of where I started discovering the layers. One of the regional managers I spoke to said that he had a soft spot for Kelson, and I figured it was kind of the typical story of like, you know, he's just a good kid. I've enjoyed getting to know him, and that's where it started. But the more we chatted, the more this regional manager opened up and said that he actually had a daughter with hearing issues of her own. So he could really relate not only to what Kelson was going through, but what Kelson's family felt. And then when I talked to the junior board member, he had some very specific memories of where Kelson had actually been the one to help him. In some emotional moments of like retiring from the board, Kelson was one of the first people who came up and gave him a hug. And I know that I am biased in the fact that growing up in an Angus family myself, I've heard the term, that we are one big family, and I'm sure anyone involved in any livestock breed association feels that too. But for me, this was like one of the stories where it was so evident to me that that's not just like a hallmark phrase we say, because this web that I found of how all these people were tied together was so much deeper than just the cattle they showed. And like I said, I thought it was going to be more of like a feel good fun piece of Kelson and his cat Baloney, but it ended up being just this really interesting example of how deep people get connected within the Angus breed. And it felt really special to me. It felt really special to Kelson and his family. But it was also one of those stories where months later, I was having people talk to me about how much they loved hearing about Kelson. And I know it's easy, stories stand out when you do get some of that feedback, but it was one of those moments where I could very happily say like he was a great kid, and the story kind of wrote itself just because of all they shared. So I know that everyone has important details in their story, but for me, this is just what Angus means to me. And it was really neat to see that that could be reflected in so many other people's stories with our breed too.
Oh, thank you so much. I love hearing that. One thing I'll never get over is how many times I talk to people and, I ask them why they love their job or what they do, and they say it's the people. And like, I get that, but we get to take that to a different level, don't we? Because we get to take those stories of the people out to everybody else. So we don't just get to hear them ourselves, we get to share them. And it's really cool how you've shared those stories. And really, all of your stories reflect interesting, hard, happy, a mixture of challenges that people have been through. So, as you guys think about it, why do you think it was so important for your story to be told? So if someone were to ask you that, why do you think is the most important reason that your story was told? Whoever wants to go first can just jump in.
I think, oops, sorry, I knew we were going to do that. Go ahead.
I think for me, there was a lot of chatter going on at the time that there wasn't much coverage going on about the wildfires in our part of the state. And I thought I needed to get our story out. And eventually that helped us get a lot of other stories out, people that were having trouble finding this or that, or what to do in an emergency. So I think it really helped at the time get stuff out. And now we know how to deal with some of those sort of disasters when there's a fire.
For me, I liked getting to share Kelson's truth, because I can't lie. The thing that I noticed was that he was set apart from other juniors. But once I started getting to know him and his family, the truth was he's not different. He's there for the same exact reasons that every other Angus kid is. His story's unique, but it still is like rooted in that desire to become like a stronger individual, both in and out of the beef industry. And like I said, growing up in the junior association myself, I know that that's what it's all about. And it was just this really cool moment to remind everybody that we are all, fighting for the same thing. Even if our stories are a little bit different in the beef industry, we all have those similar things that really ground us and keep us rooted in the same path.
Yeah, for me, it was bringing a face to policy. Both of the articles I wrote were rooted in policy impacts and what those look like on the ground for people who are actually having to deal with them every day, and tying it directly to the the cattle industry, so our readers could maybe feel a little more personality behind it and maybe empathize with some of the issues that are going on and look forward a little deeper than what they're hearing in the day-to-day political rhetoric.
That's a great point. Obviously stories that have a lot of meaning to us and a lot of emotion to us, or strike something inside of us, can be challenging to write at times because of that. What do you think was the biggest challenge that you faced while you were putting your story together, and how did you overcome it?
I can go quickly on mine. Just the challenge for me was identifying who to interview for these articles, because Arizona is not a region of the country I'm necessarily that familiar with. So worked with NCBA and also Arizona Cattlemen's, I think, to help identify those folks, and did a little bit of my own Google research to identify people who have talked about those topics. I think Vice News had done a really good piece about the Chiltons, so that gave me some good background on them. I think Dan Bell had some articles about him, but Juan was kind of an unknown for me, so that was exciting to learn some more about what was going on directly from him versus hearing it from an outside source.
I felt like I had to do a little bit of digging before I reached out to Kelson's family, because I wanted to be extremely respectful, to not, be coming at this from the angle of like, we're only featuring your son because I noticed he had a hearing aid. And I wanted to make sure that I knew what his situation was, so I could ask the appropriate questions and I could be respectful, but also still tell the full story of his Angus background and who he is as an individual. So I had to get pretty involved with some of the regional managers from his area and with our events and education department, just to get the full picture kind of in my mind before I reached out. And then even obviously navigating that conversation, he isn't as chatty as some kids might be, where he has a hard time over Zoom hearing some of the questions that I asked. So I was sitting with him and his parents, and it was finding the balance of letting them help him share his story, but also getting what I needed to fully write an article that would be educational and emotional for our readers.
I think for me, the biggest challenge was time. I'm thankful it was my thoughts were able to first come out as a blog. And then since the deadlines for the paper were going on at the time, we just kind of, adjusted the blog post and put it in the paper. And the same way with the stories that came along, we were able to get them online first and then put them in the paper when we had space. So, with a disaster like that, you think you want to be the first one to have everything, but sometimes you just need to sit and wait, and the stories will come out as time goes on. And you try to get out all the hard stuff first, and then the human aspect of the stories start to come out, and then you can check up later on, like a year. We wrote stuff a year on the year anniversary, and then I wrote something on my blog in the 5-year anniversary. So, and I think I don't know if I ever finished it, honestly, but I started a post about the fire in Texas and how it brought back all the memories. So I'll have to go look and see on that.
I think that's a really good point, though. I do think there's that war between being the first one to get it out and wanting, but then also making sure we're getting it right, and what the story we get out is the story that we want to live forever too. So interesting to think about. How did this story that you wrote change you? How did this story leave you a little different than when you started?
I'll go first. For me, I mean, it was such an emotional time that now I look at stories that I have experience with, like family succession, wildfire preparation, those sort of things. I can write them very easily, and I know who to talk to. So that sort of thing. I struggle with finding people to talk to sometimes, and for sources for stories, just the location where we're at. And this kind of helped me just to get over that and move on, and just reach out. So that's helped me a lot. And going through what we went through, I'm always kind of a pessimist. So I don't think people are always the greatest, and we found some of the greatest people through our experience. So.
for me, I know I hate to beat a dead horse, but I did grow up as an Angus member when I was a kid. And we'd always heard that there was so much the association had to offer juniors beyond just showing cattle. And candidly speaking, I never understood that statement because I was like, it's all about the livestock. Why would kids not want to be in the show ring? This is the fun place. This is where I'm growing the most. This is what I love the most. And talking to Kelson, even as like an adult out of the junior association, that was the first time I'd really seen someone be the perfect example of that. Like, he loves his cattle. He was proud that he had named them Elsa and Olaf from the Frozen movie. But his favorite part, all he could talk about were some of the contests. He loved having the opportunity to go to our national junior show and be a part of stuff that had nothing to do with the cattle. His favorite event, in fact, is the certified Angus beef cook-off. He talked my ear off about the skit and what he did and what he was going to do next year. And you could just see on his face that that truly was the moment that like was his highlight of junior show. So I just had such a new perspective on it is true that some kids really do love that like career development side a little bit more than the competitiveness of the show ring, and that's their truth and that's their Angus story, and it's just as great as the kids that really chase that champ slap. So kind of had my little inner livestock kid pretty happy and really understanding our mission as an association.
I'd say as a writer, it helped me try to bring in the human element into more of my stories that I was writing. And even today, being on the marketing side and when I'm doing writing, some of the pieces I enjoy the most are when we have those personality profiles, and it's not so much talking about product, but how the producer's using it and tying it back to how it's impacting them. And then from a personal standpoint, being able to see things from a policy standpoint up front for myself, get a little bit more of that background and help out with those conversations with friends and family when those political debates come up.
So good. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to give that as a little reminder to you guys. We're at 10:40, so I try to always cut these off at 10:45 the best I can. But if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask and share those there. But what I guess I would do while I'm giving people a little bit of time to do that is, do you guys have any final thoughts? I mean, it wouldn't be an appropriate interview unless we asked, is there anything else you would like to add? Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would be helpful for other people to learn or to take away from your experience?
Nothing's coming to mind, Jennifer.
Thanks.
The only thing I guess I might say is I know when we had like settled on this as a topic piece, like the most important story you've ever told, I kind of had a moment where I was like, I don't know how to pick, because the reason we wrote them is because we had found something important in them. And then specifically writing about association members of the Angus breed, I was like, each of them has a cool story, whether they have 5 head or 500 head, there is a nugget in there that was their aha moment that I feel like it's my job to dig out, to flesh out, and to share. So I thought that was a kind of cool realization for myself as well, that while there are these stories that stand out as being most special to me, each of them's important, and probably our readers resonate with different ones, and even what maybe I think is my best work.
I mean, I agree with what Megan's saying. There's always a story to tell. There's always someone that has experienced or someone that hasn't experienced what you have. So it's kind of a fun thing to be able to tell those stories of those people that you get to encounter.
Casey's bringing us back down to earth in the real world, I guess she, and I love this because we all have to do a lot of these stories too, but all of these are great examples of really interesting things to cover. But what kind of lessons can you take from these stories to help people when they're working on drier, more technical pieces?
I guess for me, when it comes to some of those drier technical pieces, if you're working directly with an expert on it or something, and they've got a good quote that shows some personality, a little more than just the nuts and bolts and numbers behind it, I think that really helps bring it back down to earth.
My little secret question that I always ask on more technical pieces is I like to ask an expert, why does this matter to our average cattle producer? Why would they care about this topic, or why would they want to read this article that we're working to put together? And I think that helps not only our readers, but it also helps me, because I'm guilty of leaning more towards the warm and fuzzy side. I like to read that. I like to write that a little bit more than the technical things. So if I can find the connection in my head, I'll be able to do a little bit better of a job putting the piece together.
Yeah, I agree with both what Megan and Wyatt have said about finding something different that sticks out to you. Like if it's a quote, you know, what's the harm in starting the story with the quote, and you know, kind of running with that, and then filtering in the technical stuff. So just finding a way to blend it all together.
Very good. I love that. And I love that the more you have the more you get to tell different types of stories, the more confidence you have, like you're saying, Kylene, and just trying different things and mixing it up a little bit and maybe breaking a rule or two. Not that we're advising that to you young ones that are involved, but that's maybe the joy of getting to be older as a writer, that you're just like, I can do that. You know, no high school kid, you can't do that on your paper, but I can do that in my story. I literally told my daughter that the other day. So it's fun. We have a neat opportunity, and I really appreciate what you guys do to help share stories of people in agriculture, of our experiences that go on to touch people's lives and make a difference. And at the end of the day, it's why we do what we do, and it makes our job so much more rewarding and meaningful. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. We love having you be a part of this. We're so grateful to Megan and Wyatt and Kylene for sharing their insights and perspectives. I know all of you guys are busy, and there's always deadlines and news breaking and things we need to do, but thanks for taking the time to be here with us today. So again, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I also want to let you know our next coffee and collaboration will be on May 29th, and we'll have information available on that soon. So with that, thanks again for joining us, and we'll be sure to share this on YouTube